But I'm sitting right across from Syd, and I'm having this, what I thought was this deep, creative conversation that he was totally engaged in until I realized, you could wave your hand in front of his face and there was no reaction. He was gone.
Okay, so I'm talking to Dennis Dunaway, and the Alice Cooper Group, of course, have just released this wonderful The Revenge of Alice Cooper, which is a fine record if you haven't heard it. There is a purchasing link just below this video. And while I'm here, I'm going to plug this as well. The
Ah,
excellent autobiography, Snakes, Guillotines, and Electric Chairs, My Adventures in the Alice Cooper Group. So there you are.
oh, great.
Dennis,
Thanks for that.
my pleasure. My first question is, how did it feel recreating that sound of the Alice Cooper group? And did it feel odd sort of doing that without Glenn?
Well, we've done a couple of albums that Glenn didn't actually play on in the studio on, and it's always he's always there in spirit, and of course we miss him. I miss him every day in just daily life. But I think that we all made a good attempt at keeping his spirit alive by all of us collectively trying to recreate his sarcastic humor, even though all four of us still failed at that compared to all of the zinging, the zingers that he used to throw around the room.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm very proud of how well he is represented on this album.
Yeah, I mean, you actually got a bit of how did you come about to get his guitar on this album? Because there was some guitar you had recorded. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it was a cassette tape from 1973. Glenn and I were jamming on a riff that he had that he called astute lobotomy, whatever that means. And it was like probably 3 o'clock in the morning, and we just played it over and over. And I kept this tape all of these years thinking, okay, I'm going to finish this song someday. I had no idea it'd take this many years, but I told Bob Ezrin about it, and he said, yeah, send it. So they cleaned it up digitally, and he put a click track to it. And in the studio, we wrote a song with that riff, and it happened so fast that it was almost like it was already written. It was one of those gifts from the creative gods that kind of just fell in our laps.
Yeah. So you kind of did with this recording what they did with that new Beatles song recently.
Right. This one wasn't as elaborate as that because I think they had a whole song that John had written, but still, yeah, the same idea where you can take a recording from long ago and you can still finish the song.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I read somewhere. I think it was in a book. It might have been by Martin Popoff. I don't know that. I mean, how much guitar did Glenn actually contribute to "Muscle of Love" and "Billion Dollar Babies"? And could you not argue that there's just as much guitar on this album from him?
Yeah, you can make that argument. Glenn, he was having on the School's Out album, there were a couple of times when Glenn went into overdub guitar parts and he just couldn't get it together. And Glenn wasn't the type of person that anybody would jump for the chance of going in and telling him to pack it in for the day.
Mhm.
So we would lose a whole day of valuable studio time. And it was Bob Ezrin's decision not to invite him into the studio on Billion Dollar Babies and Muscle of Love, even though Glenn was at Morgan Studios in outside of London for Generation Landslide and Billion Dollar Babies, the song. But he was also around for a lot of the songs on Billion Dollar Babies album because we recorded most of the album in our house. But Glenn contributed that spirit, that rebellious, fiery spirit is on everything. And he would be at the rehearsal room with us but we would start at 10 o'clock and Glenn would come, you know, walking downstairs at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then try to catch up. So he was partying all night and not able to function on the schedule that the rest of us were.
Yeah.
So in that respect, you can say, yeah, this guitar part is on this album. Even though, you know, if we would have rehearsed and recorded at 3 o'clock in the morning, Glenn would have been on all of those albums.
I mean, how challenging did that make the Muscle of Love sessions? I mean, you said in your book that Alice was nursing a sense of betrayal, and of course, Glenn's problems that he was having at that time. So, what was the atmosphere like when you were making that record?
Well, it was great to be in the studio with the great Jack Richardson, who was Bob Ezrin's mentor, and Jack Richardson oversaw the Love It to Death and Killer sessions.
Hmm.
And also Jack Douglas was our engineer. So that was good. We had Mick Mashburn in the studio and Bob Dolan in the studio. So that was a different dynamic because all of a sudden, because Michael Bruce brought them in, he kind of had backup for getting his ideas pushed through.
Hmm.
Uh, and also at that point, Michael had kind of talked me into, by twisting my arm, into playing bass parts that were a little bit more uh, standard, maybe
Okay.
standard grooves rather than, you know, he would always sit me down and ask me why I don't play like other bass players. And I say, well, I don't want to.
You're a big fan of McCartney's playing, if I remember.
Well, early on, the Beatles were the first. That's what
Mm.
was the final thing that talked Alice and I into really doing a band. But mostly I learned from Rolling Stones records, you know, Bill Wyman,
Hmm.
and then all of the British Invasion. I mean, we did the Kinks, the Who, you name it, all of those bands, Pretty Things, you know. Uh, but it was the Yardbirds that really opened my eyes as to what a bass could do without having to be restricted to playing root notes and blues patterns. I still use all of those concepts. Like most of my bass parts start with blues rooted patterns, but then I take them somewhere as unique as I think the song can call for. And Neil does the same on drums.
Yeah. I mean, of course, when you started out, you were the earwigs and the spiders. Was that kind of an anti-Beatles statement in a way?
Well, the Earwigs was a spoof because Alice and I were both in the Letterman's Club because we were long distance runners.
Hmm.
And we knew that they didn't like this long-haired band from England. So so we were putting on a talent show to raise money for the Letterman's Club, which basically meant they would do a fundraiser and then buy a new trophy case so they could show off their trophies in the hallway. But anyway, so we couldn't compete, but we talked them into letting us pretend that we were a band by telling them, oh, yeah, we're making fun of these guys. We're going to wear wigs and we'll be called the Earwigs and we'll be from Cesspool, England. And so they allowed us to perform. And, you know, it was great. We walked off stage going, wow, that was cool.
Well, I've spoken to many musicians of your generation, and they all state that the seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show was like a seismic event for them.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Even though a lot of the Beatles stuff and television was black and white back
Mhm.
then, it still seemed like, you know, in The Wizard of Oz, where it goes from black and white and the house lands in Oz and all of a sudden everything's Technicolor. That's what it felt like.
Yeah,
I mean, the top 10 singles on AM radio in Phoenix, Arizona were all Beatles.
right, right. I mean, it was. I mean, I think even Gene Simmons of Kiss says it was one of the performances that kind of opened up his eyes as the possibilities of rock and roll and things like that. And John Lennon famously said before Elvis, there was nothing. And of course, then the Beatles kind of replaced all that sort of rock and roll. I'd like to ask you about there's a track on here called if I can find it, something Syd.
What a Sid.
What is Syd? What is a Syd?
Well, you had to know Glenn Buxton and hear him say that on many occasions to kind of get an idea of what it is. But say if somebody walked into a room and tripped and spilled their drink, then Glenn would go, "What a Sid." So, so and people think, oh well, it's spelled like Syd Barrett, and
Uh,
they, and Pink Floyd stayed at our house when they came over for their first tour.
yeah,
We no, Glenn was saying that all the way back in high school, way before we ever heard of Pink Floyd.
yeah.
But it's just a saying that Glenn used a lot, and and you had to slide your hand through the air when you said it. What a Sid.
Well, mentioning Pink Floyd, of course. So what was your impression of Syd Barrett when you met him? And is it true that he jammed with Glenn?
Uh, when I met them, it was in our kitchen
Hmm.
and we had no food. I think Roger Waters was the one that went to the refrigerator to see what there was to eat. And we said, "Oh no, don't open. There's only carrots in there." And they all laughed, thinking it was a joke. And when he opened it, there was a gigantic bag of carrots because our light show guy had gotten a job at the local juice bar. So so we ended up ordering pizza. But I was sitting at a table directly across from Syd Barrett, and by then they had become heroes of ours just because we felt like we were exploring outer space alone. And then when we found out about Pink Floyd, it was like, hey, wait a minute, they're out here too. Uh, Paul McCartney had talked about Pink Floyd in an early interview. And so Alice sent away to England and got Pink Floyd album. So we knew who they were and loved the Piper at the Gates of Dawn album. But I'm sitting right across from Syd and I'm having this what I thought was this deep creative conversation that he was totally engaged in until I realized, you could wave your hand in front of his face and there was no reaction. He was gone. And his guitar was leaning in the corner. It didn't have a case. The strings were all rusty and really high. And I asked the roadie, I said, what's going on with the guitar? And he said, well, at this point, I have to follow Syd around so he doesn't get lost because he'll walk out of the room and we'll have to go find him somewhere. And I found his guitar laying in the street in the rain. And he said, it's sad, isn't it? And oh man, it was more than sad. It was a total shocker to me.
Yeah.
I went to their concert and and it was amazing. The light the light show was just amazing. It was electronic strobes, and they had covered their Vox amps with white sheets so that everything stood out really sharply. But Syd walked out on stage and looked like he walked up to the microphone and got shocked, and then he just stood there. So the other three guys performed without him pretty much. So David Gilmour was along with them on that trip, and they were having many discussions about what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think Floyd improved when Gilmore joined and Sid left, in your opinion?
Well, they had somebody that could play instead of stand there,
Mm.
so of course. But I love the, I love the Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and I like the erratic Syd Barrett influence. I thought they got very calm with David Gilmour, but of course, you can't deny the talent there. I mean,
Yeah.
is such an amazing guitar player and songwriter. So it worked out in the end, but at first it was a shocker.
Yeah. Of course, you were around, in the early 70s. It was the age of progressive rock. You had bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Yes, Gentle Giant, all those guys. How did you feel about progressive rock at the time? Did you find it a bit pompous, maybe, compared to what you guys were doing?
Oh no, you had to admire them as a musician. In fact, I had never heard of Yes. We did a show in, I think, 1972 in
Mhm.
Ottawa, Canada with Black Sabbath. And I remember walking in thinking, oh my God, I'm exhausted. I got to summon my energy. We're on the bill with Black Sabbath. We got to be great tonight. And then this opening band that nobody, because people were filing into the arena, they weren't paying any attention to them. And it was Yes. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm worried about Black Sabbath. Who are these guys? Of course, I worry about stuff like that. Then we throw a couple chickens at the audience and there's no comparison.
Well, that's where Yes went wrong. I think, if Yes had thrown a few chickens into the audience, maybe they would have gone down better. Um, I mean, this new album, the production is absolutely fantastic. I do think it's fair to say that Bob Ezrin is the fifth Beatle when it comes to the Alice Cooper group.
Oh, absolutely. He's part of the chemistry. I mean,
Yeah.
he's the thing that holds everything together because we have so many ideas. We're never sitting there thinking, does anybody have anything? It's always like, what should we choose to do next? And this album was very much like that. We had about 70 songs to choose from. We went in the studio and then we even wrote a couple songs. What Happened to You, the Glenn Buxton one, and Black Mamba happened ground up right in the studio. So we were very much just following the flow of where the creative energy guided us. And then we all would be throwing in all of our ideas. And if there was ever a bog down in the debates, Bob Ezrin would jump in and say, well, we're doing it this way. Let's move forward, which is what a producer does. But Bob is also a great um, cheerleader. he,
Hmm.
he comes with this enthusiasm, and uh, and it's going to sound good, so you don't have that worry.
That's right. I mean, speaking of producers, do you think Easy Action would have been a much better album had it not been produced by David Briggs?
If that had had a producer that didn't hate us, yeah, it would have been better. David Briggs did not like anything about us. He didn't like our humor. He didn't like the way we dressed. He didn't like our music. So, yeah, pretty much anybody would have done a better job, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned just a minute ago that there were loads and loads of songs you recorded for this new album. Does that suggest there might be another album from the Alice Cooper group or a deluxe edition maybe or something?
Well, we have the goods, so
Hmm.
I'm ready. All it takes is that phone call that I've been waiting for since 19 whatever 74, and now I'm waiting for it since July 25th, 2025. So we went from doing two albums a year to doing hopefully not two albums every century.
Well, do you envisage touring this album maybe? You guys getting on the road and doing something like that? Or would that be
Well,
a
it's the
stretch too
same
far?
thing. It's the same thing. We're a
Uh-huh.
live band. We brought spectacle to live rock shows. So, we're ready. Everybody's biting at the bit to go. We're all it takes is that phone call and we're out there. I love being on stage. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so much fun when everything's working, of course, but that instant energy that comes back from the crowd fuels you.
I
And,
bet.
that's what it's all about. You walk off stage and, it takes a while for your feet to touch down because it's so much fun.
Yeah. Would there still be chickens though?
I don't think so. Even though this is funny, I have this photograph of Alice outside the studio, the Carriage House Studios in Stamford, Connecticut, where we recorded this album. And the owner, Johnny Montanese, has chickens. So
Okay.
Alice is out in the yard trying to talk the chickens into being in the show, and they're having nothing to do with it. But I've got a photo of that.
This is the brand new album by the Alice Cooper Group, The Revenge of Alice Cooper. I highly recommend you get yourself a copy. It's a wonderful record if you're a fan of those early albums. And it's available to buy now. There is a purchasing link just below this video. Dennis, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And you enjoy the rest of your day because it's quite early where you are at the moment, isn't it?
No, not bad, not bad. It's like it's afternoon. It's 1:27 here now.
Okay.
So I'm awake. I just unfortunately wasn't paying attention to my calendar this morning. But always great to talk to you, Barry. And I've seen your show, and your opinion is always valid.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anyway, you have a great day. I'm gonna go and see what my children are up to. Anyway, thank you so much, Dennis.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye
All the
bye.
best, mate. Bye bye.